So the next match that we'll be seeing is the Mac Falcons, versus Robo Rambler, which is Georgia Institute of Technology.
Yeah, they finally made their way through inspection. We were saying earlier, Georgia Tech, they had a few issues last year, weren't able to make it to the field in 2024. 2025, maybe this is their year. They had an awesome first match earlier today. So we are excited to see them on the field against the McMaster University Mac Falcons.
All right, so we can talk a little bit more about some of the things that we were mentioning earlier. We now have that blue team robot and the red team robots on the field. So you can see the referee systems coming into action here. As I was describing, we can see on the right-hand side the #1 hero robot, and it has got blue on it because it is the blue team. And then on the opposite side, those robots are lighting up red. So that is something that our RoboMaster referee system is doing, not the unique design of each of these robots. However, when we're looking closely, basically everything else is the design of each team. So you'll see that every team has a very, very different look to their robot. They all have to do the same functionality and all have to play the same game. And like we said, pass inspection. However, once we get the referee system on there, they're all ready to play. So we can see right now, Robo Rambler is getting their robots all ready and set up. So you can see they have those controllers there. Those are used often for testing. And on top, you can see the turrets. To the left, you can see the little green, a lot of RoboMaster people affectionately like to call them grapes. And then on the right, the hero robot, you'll see that it has quite a thick neck there. The reason for that is those hero robots are able to shoot 42mm projectiles, about the size of a golf ball. Those can go very fast and definitely be very painful if you're standing directly in the way, so I would not recommend. Same with the 17mm. Just don't stand in front of the robots, I would recommend, especially if you hear the flywheels, which are used to actually launch those projectiles out. So now we can see those blue robots ready to go. One thing you'll notice is we are in a 3v3 competition. However, this blue team only has 2 robots.
Ooh, that is interesting. Now, I have heard some rumblings. Unfortunately, there have been a few logistics. We keep mentioning all of the logistics and work that goes into getting these robots and these teams to the field. There's a lot that can go wrong, and I believe I have heard some rumblings that unfortunately there have been some issues here and there getting everything to the field, but we're excited to see the robots that we do have here. Excited to finally get to see them play here in this match. We're now in that final initialization section, that referee system getting ready to go. We're about to play that match between Georgia Tech in red and McMaster University in blue.
All right, and our robots are off. So we are already seeing the Georgia Institute of Tech. Those robots are already off and going. So you can, as we talked about, there's that bumpy road. We see them kind of avoid that area. It can be a little more gentle on the robots, especially if there is a need to go straight over it. The blue robots are also getting moving now.
Absolutely, yeah. Now our main objective in this game mode is going to be that central capture point. You see that green sectioned off area with the crown. Red standard free from Georgia Tech already on that central buff point. You can see up in the top left corner. They're gaining victory points, 1 point every second, so long as they hold possession of that central capture point. Both red robots now on that central point. And we'll have to see what McMaster University can do as both robots make their way out of that reload zone.
Yeah, and it looks like our number 3 on the MacU team isn't moving much. I wonder if something's going on in the pilot booth. So it is possible that something has happened in between inspection and now that means that driving just isn't possible for those pilots right now. We are seeing the blue hero, though, slowly inching its way around. Hopefully we'll see some of these robots fire.
Yeah, at least an initial success here. We've got both robots. They left their initial starting positions. Both robots start in their team's resupply zone, and they've inched their way now out of that resupply zone. Hero, as you mentioned, slowly approaching that central buff point. We shall have to see if they're able to land any of those 42mm projectiles. We can see actually in this fancy air overlay, we can see right below their health bar, the number 0. They have purchased no projectiles. Actually, pretty much all of our teams, except just now, Red Infantry, Red Standard Free, up in that top left corner of your screen. They have purchased 200 projectiles. You can see in the middle of your screen there, the amount of gold each team has. They need to use that gold in order to purchase projectiles to fire at their opposing team. Here comes Red Standard Free now
Yeah,
at that sort of buff point.
oh, sorry. But yeah, this is another one of the parts where we can see this combination between esports and the physical game. For them to be able to use the mechanical parts of their robot, they have to use that esports-esque interface to be able to actually purchase the projectiles. So I think we did actually see a few shots happen there.
Yeah, you can see they had two projectiles purchased at the start of the match, or just earlier on. They now are down to 176. Each one fired through that referee speed monitor module will count as a projectile spent. They are slowly inching their way here in our victory progression. 135 victory points at the moment, and they still do have possession of that central buff point. McMaster will have to do something here if they want to take this first round of this match. 200 total victory points will mean that the round goes to that red team, Georgia Tech's Robo Ramblers.
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting is in this new game, one of the main things that you have to do is get your robot into that middle zone. Oh, we did actually just hear some shots go off.
Yeah, looks like we see some fire exchanged at the top right corner of the screen between Red Standard Free and the Blue Hero. We see a little bit of damage on that Blue Hero, but they do have some ammo purchased. 8 projectiles there in that Blue Hero, and they land one of those devastating 42mm shots on that Red Standard Free, knock off a huge chunk, nearly half their health.
So even though that level, oh,
Whoa!
wow, so McMaster's actually killed one of our Georgia Tech robots.
And that's going to get them a lot of victory points there. Georgia Tech still with possession of that central buff point, and they're inches away from victory. But McMaster there with that one shot, that one elimination of that robot, they got 20 victory points, but in the end, Red Georgia Tech does take that first round.
Yeah, so one thing that is interesting is even though we saw our blue team actually take and land shots on that red team, the red team still won. This is an interesting part of our new field is essentially when you're sitting in that green zone, that is what gets you those points to win. So even though that blue team was doing successful shots, they weren't in that zone to be getting those points.
Absolutely. A bit of a slow start there from McMaster. Hopefully we have all those issues worked out now, and we'll get to see some more awesome work from them. They were really, they started off a little slow, like I mentioned, but at the end, they did get those 20 victory points from that landing of the 42mm shot on that Red Standard's armor plates. So maybe as things get going here, maybe we'll start to see more of those projectiles from McMaster's robots. We do see here on the stat screen, 175 points of damage done by that blue team. They do actually do a little bit more damage than Georgia Tech, and they did ultimately knock out one of those robots versus Georgia Tech. They were a little bit more defensive. They did rush straight to that capture point. They captured that central square for the entirety of that match, earning them all 200 victory points. But they didn't really fire that many projectiles or kill any robots.
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting is that our MacU team, they only fired 6 projectiles. However, they got way more damage points.
Absolutely. Remember, those armor plates they have those sensors built in. I believe there are 4 sensors, some other sensor that can detect how hard they're getting hit. And those large, massive 42mm projectiles just impart so much more force on those armor plates that they're able to do way more damage as a hero at the expense of each of those shots being just a little bit more expensive in terms of gold. Just about 90 seconds left now in our second setup phase. These are best of 2, I believe, rounds here in our group stage. Each match earning points for these teams within their groups, 4 groups of 5 teams each. We'll see as we go for a group stage which teams are able to qualify for our knockout tournament later in the week.
Yeah, so basically how our groups are formed is we look back at our previous competition. The top 8 teams are then, is it 8? I believe it's 8. Or is it?
I believe it's 8. I think so. The top 2 from each group. So
yes.
For a total of 4 groups, 8 teams.
Okay, done my math right. We're all good to go. But yes, so those top 8 teams will be essentially seeded into these groups. And then we have 3 more teams in each group that are basically randomly assigned. So they will essentially draw out of a hat to figure out which group they're going to be into. So this does lead to some, what I'd like to say are probably more spicy groups versus some that are maybe not as competitive for certain teams. But it's very interesting to see as they acquire these points. Just because they lose one match does not mean they're going to be knocked out. So they're just trying to accrue as many points as possible before the knockout stage is completed.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to be working through our group stages throughout the next day or so here on RMNA. You mentioned the spicy groups earlier. If you want to learn more about the group stages, we had a whole discussion over on the RMNA Esports production channel. Go watch Rep. We got Preston and Shar and Steven and some other folks talking about all the spicy groups, all the spice you could ever want here at Roadmaster.
Yes.
We're getting ready for our second round of the Master versus Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and you probably would have just seen in the down bottom right is that we had one of our MacU team members on the field almost too long.
Definitely some things to watch out for as we get ready to kick off our second round.
All right, so no one's moved yet, but we know both of these robots can move.
Yep, and here comes Red Standard Free, that infantry, and the hero quickly following suit there on that far left side of the field.
They're ready to go, taking ownership of that center area.
Yep, central
However,
capture.
we do have our blue hero kind of moving on out. It'll be interesting to see if they do actually come and try and capture the center area there.
Yeah, a little bit more aggression here
movement
from the blue hero. We do see all four robots now on the field having purchased projectiles. That Red Standard Free infantry firing shots at that blue hero as they make their way around the wall towards that central capture point.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
All right, so that blue hero just landed a shot of a 42mm projectile on that number 3 standard.
And we do see on the overlay that hero, by landing that shot on that Red infantry, did receive a level up. These robots, just like in a video game, have levels, and they'll get even more powerful as the game progresses.
All right, we can now see the view from the Robo Rambler Red hero. It looks like he's going in to try and get a shot on that number 1 blue hero.
Yeah,
so a hero versus hero. However, seems to be a...
One shot lands from that MacFaster hero. That 14mm projectile glances right off that hero armor plate, a little bit wider those hero armor plates, and it knocks out exactly half their health. You see in the bottom left corner of your screen. 100 points down, 100 points of health left for this hero, but they still have possession of that central capture point. Our main objective of this game, they're still earning points to hit that 200 total.
Yeah, so I find it quite interesting that despite the fact that that MacU hero is able to drive around and to launch projectiles, we're not really seeing him approaching that center zone, which is what he would need to do to be able to get those points. If you look up at the top left, we actually see that Georgia is over halfway to winning.
Yep, just over halfway now. Standard Free briefly firing some projectiles at that blue hero before making it, I believe, retreats behind some sort of wall, perhaps. We can no longer see it from that central perspective.
Yep, so there you can just about see the top of it there, hiding behind that wall, which avoiding getting shot at by the other team.
Now, maybe be careful here not to reveal any potential secrets, perhaps. But Red Hero looks like a bit more defensive. They take a little step back, make their way towards that central buff point. Here on the screen, you can see those blue robots. Red now up to 140 points, and they continue to gain 1 point per second as they maintain a hold of that central capture point. Blue will have to push in hard if they want to be able to earn any victory points and to prevent a Georgia Tech Robo Rambler win in the second round.
Yeah, so what I find very interesting is this is where we can see how strategy really becomes a part of this game. So even though both teams have robots that are firing, the red team, which has gotten both of its robots into that center area, is able to gain way more points and is really close to winning at this point. When that blue team, as far as I'm aware, just as capable of getting those shots. It has landed shots on the other team. However, because it hasn't gotten to that central area, not gaining so many of those points.
Yeah, maybe a couple issues left to work out there on that blue infantry. You see it's still in that starting resupply zone. Blue Hero did land several shots, but as we approach those final few seconds, victory points do end up in favor of Georgia Tech on the red side, and Robo Rambler does take the win here in round 2.
All right. So that means that Robo Rambler from Georgia Tech will be taking 2 points from that. So what that means is that going into their next matches, those 2 points will be compared to the rest of their group. They are in Group C, and then the teams with the most points from within Group C will be able to proceed to the next stage.
Yeah, now I think these stats are really interesting, actually, because you can see here that blue side, McMaster did ultimately have about 20 points more damage dealt by their team, 220 to 200 points of damage done. We can see that the red team that ultimately did take the win there based on victory points, they fired a 100 flat of those 17mm projectiles. They did. Looks like they maybe probably all made their mark, 2 points of damage each for each of 100 total projectiles. That's those 200 points of damage. Blue only shot 8 42mm projectiles. Looks like that infantry did also fire one single 17mm projectile, but they did comparable, if not more, in fact more damage than the red team there. But ultimately, like you mentioned, Amelia, that red team, Georgia Tech, does take the win because they just kept a hold of that central capture point.
Yeah, so that will be something that's really interesting to see, especially with the teams who are maybe having some more engineering issues where perhaps they're not able to fire as many projectiles. If they are able to drive, though, they might just go sit out in that central area. We'll have to see how that kind of affects the overall game in terms of what happens next. So it might be that our MacU team, the driving just maybe wasn't going quite to plan. Although I am interested to kind of figure out why maybe they didn't send that hero to that center zone.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some more information about that team later in our competition.